The roar of the crowd echoed throughout the vast arena, sending a wave of unease through Jayen's chest. This was it, the last duel of his life. He had survived countless battles before, each one harder than the last. But today, something felt different. The arena stretched out before him, a massive circular pit surrounded by high walls, designed to trap its victims inside. The dirt beneath his boots was dry and cracked, the heat of the twin suns above bearing down on him, making the air shimmer with oppressive heat. The crowd, a sea of faces, screamed his name, hungry for blood. But it wasn't Jayen they cared about. It was a kill. And today, they would get what they wanted. He gripped his weapon tighter, the cold metal sending a shiver through his gloved hands. His sword seemed more than its fair share of battles, its surface scratched and worn from years of use. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a symbol, the last of the Death Duelists, a title that carried with it both fear and respect, but also a constant reminder of how many had fallen before him. Jayen was the last one standing, the only survivor of a deadly tradition that spanned centuries. But he was also cursed, because once you became the last, you never truly survived. The death duels had no mercy. They were designed to break you. He wasn't fighting for honor. He wasn't even fighting for survival anymore. Jayen fought because it was all he knew. Every other choice had been stripped from him the moment he stepped onto this cursed planet. Ghal-Rain, a world built on the blood of its inhabitants, where the only law was kill or be killed, where no one lived long enough to remember their own name. The arena was filled with spectators from all over the planet, each one here to witness the spectacle, to watch the bloodshed, to cheer for the brutality that defined the death duels. Jayen could feel their eyes on him, their eager gaze watching, waiting for his fall. They didn't care who he was. They only cared about the entertainment of the fight. He had been part of this system for as long as he could remember. But today, he knew something was different. Something about this duel wasn't right. The announcer's voice boomed across the arena, a voice that had become a constant in Jayen's life. And now the final duel, the Last Death Duelist, Jayen of House Keshen, who has survived beyond all odds. And today he faces the unstoppable force of Zorth, the beast of Ghal-Rain. The crowd erupted in wild applause, the sound deafening. Jayen's eyes narrowed as the name of his opponent rang in his ears. Zorth, the beast. He had heard stories. Zorth was no ordinary fighter. The beast was a monstrous, hulking creature, known for its ruthless killing techniques and unyielding power. Jayen had seen him fight before, and the way he moved, like a predator stalking its prey, was enough to make anyone question their ability to survive against him. But Jayen was no stranger to monsters. He had fought and killed things far worse than Zorth, or so he thought. His pulse quickened as the gates at the far side of the arena opened. He could feel the heat of the crowd's breath, smell the sweat and blood of the hundreds who had come to watch the bloodshed. There, emerging from the shadows, was his opponent. Zorth was massive, easily twice the size of any normal man. His skin was mottled with scars, his eyes gleaming with an eerie, unnatural glow. He didn't walk. He loomed, each step shaking the ground beneath him. His hands were massive, each one clutching a weapon that looked more like a giant cleaver than anything meant for combat. Jayen had never seen anything like it before. It was massive, the blade glowing with a strange blue light, and it hummed as if alive. Zorth's gaze locked onto Jayen, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. The air between them thickened with tension. It wasn't just the eyes of the crowd that watched. It was the eyes of death itself, staring at him, waiting for the right moment to strike. Jayen's heart pounded in his chest. His fingers tightened around the grip of his own weapon. He had fought in countless duels before, but this felt different. It felt wrong. The planet itself seemed to be watching, as if it were holding its breath, waiting to see who would fall. He stepped forward, his boots scraping against the dirt as he moved toward the center of the arena. His every movement was measured, controlled. He couldn't afford to make a mistake. This wasn't just any fight. This was the end of the line. If he didn't survive this duel, he would be the last of the death duelists to fall. His legacy would be buried in the sand, forgotten, and the planet would continue to feast on the blood of its inhabitants. The announcer's voice boomed again, cutting through Jayen's thoughts. Fight! The moment the word left the announcer's lips, Zorth charged. His massive cleaver swung through the air, its edge shimmering in the light. Jayen reacted instantly, his body moving on pure instinct. He dodged to the side, barely avoiding the massive blade that slashed through the air where he had just been standing. The ground trembled under Zortha's feet, and Jayen could hear the monstrous roar that followed as his opponent swung again. Jayen moved quickly, staying just out of Zortha's reach. His heart pounded in his chest, the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He could feel the eyes of the crowd on him, but he didn't care. They could scream, they could cheer, but it didn't matter. His focus was entirely on Zorth. This wasn't about glory. This wasn't about honor. This was about survival. Zorth growled, the sound low and guttural. He swung his weapon again, this time with such force that Jayen had no choice but to roll to the side to avoid being crushed. The cleaver struck the ground with a deafening thud, sending dirt and debris flying into the air. Jayen used the opportunity to strike, darting in close with a quick, calculated move. His blade met Zortha's arm, but it barely left a mark. Zorth roared in pain, spinning to face Jayen with a look of rage in his eyes. But Jayen didn't wait for him to recover. He darted in again, this time aiming for Zortha's exposed side. The move was quick, precise, but Zorth was faster than he anticipated. The beast swung his cleaver in a wild arc, knocking Jayen off his feet and sending him crashing to the ground. His breath was knocked out of him, and for a moment, everything went dark. Pain exploded in his side as he rolled to his feet. Blood seeped from a deep gash on his ribs, but Jayen forced himself to stand. He couldn't afford to show weakness. Not here, not now. Zorth grinned, the predator's smile on his face as he approached. But then, something strange happened. The weapon in Zortha's hand began to glow brighter, and the hum grew louder, almost as if it were alive. Jayen's heart raced. This wasn't just a duel. It was a trap. The weapon in Zortha's hand wasn't just an instrument of death. It was something else. Something that wasn't part of the fight. The air around them began to shimmer, and Jayen's instinct screamed at him to run. But it was too late. The energy in the arena shifted, and he knew without a doubt that this was no longer just a fight for survival. This was a fight for his very life. And it wasn't just Zorth who was his enemy. Jayen's eyes widened as the ground beneath him began to tremble, and the arena seemed to pulse with a dark, foreboding energy. The planet was alive, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. And he was its prey. Jayen's breath was ragged as he staggered to his feet, the pain in his side a constant reminder of how close he had come to death. The massive form of Zorth loomed above him, the beast's weapon still humming with an unnatural energy. The crowd roared, but the sound felt distant, muffled, as though something was blocking it out. Jayen's world was reduced to the pain in his body and the sharp clarity of his mind, honed from years of survival in the deadly death duels. He wiped the blood from his lips, his eyes never leaving Zortha's hulking form. The duel wasn't over yet. The beast had stepped back, his weapon still glowing, but Jayen knew something had shifted. It wasn't just a physical fight that was happening now. There was something else, something deeper, lurking beneath the surface of this arena. The ground beneath his feet seemed to move, almost like it was breathing, pulsing with an energy he couldn't explain. It was as though the planet itself was alive, watching him, waiting for him to make a move. Jayen tried to focus, tried to ignore the strange sensation that gripped his chest. The air felt heavier, thicker, pressing down on him like a weight he couldn't shake. His thoughts scattered, fragmented. Every instinct told him to stay focused on Zorth, to finish the duel, but something in his gut told him that the real enemy wasn't the beast in front of him. The real enemy was the arena itself, the very planet he was standing on. It was playing a game with him, and he was just one piece on its board. Suddenly, Jayen heard it whispers, soft at first, like a breeze rustling the leaves of a tree. But the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They seemed to come from everywhere, filling his ears with words he couldn't quite make out. His head snapped around, but there was no one there. No one but the crowd, watching, their faces blurred by the haze of the heat rising from the arena floor. The whispers continued, urgent and chilling. The planet is watching. You are just a pawn in its game. Jayen froze, his heart pounding in his chest. The words echoed in his mind, repeating over and over like a chant he couldn't escape. Was this just a trick of the heat, A side effect of the constant pressure of the death duels? Or was something else happening? He shook his head, trying to clear the thoughts, but the feeling of being watched intensified. The arena was alive, the ground shifting beneath his feet, as if it were breathing with him, responding to his every move. He looked up at Zorth, who was still waiting, his glowing weapon raised. The beast seemed to be watching Jayen with a predatory gleam in his eyes, but Jayen couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Zorth wasn't the only danger here. The arena itself, the very planet, was a threat. And worse yet, Jayen didn't know how to fight it. The whispering voice grew louder, more insistent. It sees you. It knows you. You can't escape. Jayen's mind raced, struggling to comprehend what was happening. Was he losing his mind? Was this just the pressure of the fight getting to him? He couldn't tell. His senses were disoriented, his vision blurring as the whispers continued to invade his thoughts. The planet was playing with him, toying with his mind. His hands trembled as he tightened his grip on his weapon, trying to steady himself. He couldn't let the voice distract him. He couldn't let the arena win. He needed to finish this duel. He had to survive. Jayen's eyes scanned the crowd, looking for something, anything, to ground himself. But as he searched, something caught his eye, a figure in the stands. Someone familiar. His heart skipped a beat. He couldn't believe it. There, in the midst of the crowd, was a face he recognized. A face he thought he would never see again. A face he had lost long ago. It was her, Elara. His mind raced. Elara was supposed to be dead. She had been one of the first to fall in the duels. Her death a constant weight on Jayen's soul. He had watched her die, had felt her life slip away in his arms. There was no way she could be here. And yet, there she was, staring back at him with wide eyes, her expression unreadable. Her hair, once long and dark, was now short, her face changed by time and hardship. But it was her. He knew it in the pit of his stomach. Jayen's breath caught in his throat. What was going on? Was this some kind of illusion? A trick of the planet? No, it couldn't be. It felt too real. His heart pounded in his chest, his pulse quickening as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. But no matter how hard he focused, the figure in the crowd remained the same. Elara, alive. But how? Why? He had seen her die, had held her hand as her life slipped away. There was no way she could be here. It didn't make sense. His mind spun, the whispers in his ears growing louder as the reality of the situation began to crack. Was this some sort of psychological game? Was this part of the duel? Was this the planet manipulating him, playing with his memories, using his greatest loss against him? The voice in his head continued to whisper, growing darker now. You can't trust what you see. The planet knows your pain. It knows your fears. It's using them against you. The ground beneath him seemed to shift again, the dirt underfoot now soft and unstable, like quicksand. Jayen's stomach turned. He had no idea what was real anymore. Zor stepped forward, his massive form blocking Jayen's view of Elara. The beast raised his weapon, and Jayen instinctively readied his sword, his grip tight, his body tense. But the weight of the whispers, the vision of Elara, and the shifting earth all threatened to pull him under. He could feel the arena's gaze on him, the oppressive weight of the planet's influence pressing down on him, suffocating him. This duel was no longer just a fight for survival. This was something far more sinister. The planet was alive, and it was playing with him, with his mind, his memories, and his soul. Jayen had been a pawn in the death duels before, but this was different. He wasn't just fighting for his life anymore. He was fighting for his sanity. With a swift motion, Zorth lunged at him, his massive cleaver cutting through the air. Jayen barely dodged, rolling to the side, his body aching with every movement. But his mind was distracted, pulled in 100 different directions. The whispers were louder now, the voice mocking him. You will never escape. You are its plaything. You always were. Jayen gritted his teeth and stood, his vision clouded with doubt. He had to fight. He had to survive. But how could he, when everything around him was crumbling? How could he fight when his own mind was turning against him? He faced Zorth once more, his sword raised, his stance steady. But his heart was no longer in the fight. The battle for his life was no longer just against the beast. It was against the very planet beneath his feet, a planet that seemed to know him better than he knew himself. And in that moment, Jayen realized the truth. The death duels had never been about survival. They had been about something much darker, something far beyond death. And the game was just beginning. Jayen's muscles ached as he stumbled through the darkened tunnels beneath the arena. The air was thick, heavy with the stench of sweat and fear, and the walls felt like they were closing in on him. He had only a few hours to figure out his next move, and the pressure of the death duels weighed on him more than ever. His mind raced, and his thoughts were clouded. But there was one thing he was certain of now. The duels weren't what they seemed. The death duels had always been about survival. At least, that's what he had been led to believe. But the more he learned, the less he understood. The voice in his head, the strange sensation of the planet watching, it was all part of something much bigger. The duels weren't just a fight for life. They were a game, one that was rigged, one that no one had a chance of winning. The planet wasn't just a backdrop for these fights. It was a player, and Jayen was just a pawn. That's why it teamed up with Rill, a fellow survivor who had also seen the cracks in the system. At first, it had been an uneasy alliance. Jayen didn't trust anyone, especially not another duelist. In the death duels, trust was a rare commodity. Everyone was out for themselves, willing to kill anyone in their way. But Rill had been different. He had seen the same things Jayen had seen. He had noticed the strange shifts in the planet's energy, the unnatural way the duels felt more like a manipulation than a competition. Together, they had made plans, trying to figure out a way to escape the madness that surrounded them. They had discovered that the duels were fixed. The fights weren't about survival at all. They were about control. The death duelists were nothing more than pawns in a game, and the planet, this living, breathing entity, was the one calling the shots. Jayen and Rill were nothing more than tools in its hands, meant to fight each other until only one remained standing. But the twist was worse than Jayen had expected. The death duelists weren't born into this. They weren't chosen by chance. They were made. The realization hit Jayen like a slap to the face. The death duelists, the so-called champions of Ghal-Rain, were engineered. They weren't ordinary people. They were creations bred and conditioned for one purpose: to fight, to die, and to control the planet. The cruel truth was that Jayen hadn't just been thrust into this deadly game. He had been bred for it, a perfect warrior designed to survive the impossible, only to be sacrificed when the planet's hunger demanded it. Jayen's stomach churned at the thought. He had always known there was something wrong, something unnatural about the duels. But this was a betrayal of everything he had ever believed. The death duels were nothing more than a sick game, a twisted system that used people like him to fuel its power. As they dug deeper into their investigation, Jayen and Rill stumbled upon a terrible discovery. The duels were nothing more than a way to feed the planet. Every time a duelist died, their energy, their life force, was absorbed by the arena itself, by the living planet that watched over them. The longer they fought, the stronger the planet grew. It wasn't just about survival anymore. The duels were a ritual, a way for the planet to feed off the fear, the blood, and the death it created. The death duelists weren't just fighters. They were sacrifices, offering their lives to feed the planet hunger. Jayen's head spun as he processed the information. He could feel the weight of the planet's gaze upon him, a constant pressure that threatened to crush him. Every breath he took, every step he made, was part of its plan. He was nothing more than a cog in a machine he didn't understand. And the worst part? He couldn't escape. There was no way out. The planet had him trapped, and no matter how hard he fought, it would never let him go. Rill had begun to grow paranoid. Jayen could see it in his eyes, the way his hands shook when he held his weapon. There was something off about him, something that Jayen couldn't put his finger on. But the closer they got to the truth, the more Rill seemed to pull away. They had been a team, united by a common goal, but now Jayen could feel the distance between them growing. He couldn't shake the feeling that Rill was hiding something from him. It wasn't until the night of the next duel that Jayen realized just how far things had gone. Rill had vanished. There had been no trace of him, no sign that he had even been in the room. All that remained was a pool of blood and a single, cryptic message written on the wall in a strange, jagged script. The planet is hungry. Jayen's heart pounded as he stared at the message, trying to make sense of it. Had Rill been taken? Had he been killed? Or had he betrayed him? The blood was still fresh, the stains dark against the stone floor. But there was no time to investigate further. The next duel was approaching, and Jayen had to be ready. But the words on the wall gnawed at him, a warning he couldn't ignore. The planet was hungry, and it would stop at nothing to get what it wanted. Jayen didn't know what had happened to Rill, but he knew one thing for sure. The betrayal had begun. No one could be trusted in this place. Not even those who seemed to fight for the same cause. The death duels had always been a game of survival, but now they had become something much darker. Jayen had thought he understood the rules, but now he realized that he had only scratched the surface. The arena wasn't just a place of bloodshed. It was a trap, a living entity that fed on the fighters, on their pain, on their fear, and on their lives. As he stepped into the arena once again, Jayen's mind was clouded with doubts. Rill's disappearance weighed heavily on him. But he couldn't let it distract him. The fight was all that mattered now. He had to survive. He had to keep moving forward. But deep inside, he knew that the real battle was just beginning. And no matter how hard he fought, the planet was always one step ahead. Jayen stood alone in the darkened arena, his breath shallow and ragged. The fight had ended, but something still lingered in the air. Something far more dangerous than the physical duels. He had won again, but winning meant nothing here. Not anymore. The planet was watching him, waiting, feeding on the violence and fear that surrounded him. But he still didn't understand it all. He only knew one thing. Something deep beneath the surface was alive, and it was using them. It wasn't just the arena that was alive. It was the entire planet. The ground beneath his feet had begun to feel different, more like it was pulsing than solid. It was as if the very earth was aware of him, aware of the struggle, the bloodshed. As Jayen walked, the ground seemed to shift with every step, subtly but unmistakably. He couldn't ignore the eerie sensation that something was stirring, something watching him from the depths. But it wasn't just the arena. No, this was something far larger. He had been trying to understand the strange voice that echoed in his mind ever since he first entered the arena. At first, he thought it was just the stress of the duels, the endless cycle of bloodshed and fear messing with his mind. But the more time passed, the clearer it became. The voice wasn't in his head because he was losing his grip on reality. It was in his head because the planet itself was alive. Ghal-Rain wasn't just a barren wasteland where bloodthirsty duels took place. It was a sentient being. The planet itself was aware of the people living on it, the people fighting for their lives in the arena, and it wasn't content to just watch. It wanted to feed. It wanted chaos. It thrived on it. The duels weren't just games of survival. They were feeding the planet's insatiable hunger. The truth began to unfold as Jayen dug deeper into the history of the death duels. The duels had been going on for centuries, but no one ever survived. Every champion, every fighter, was just another offering to the planet. The death duelists weren't chosen because they were skilled warriors. They were chosen because they were sacrifices. The planet fed off their pain, their fear, their blood, and their death. The more brutal the duels, the more energy the planet absorbed. The death duelists weren't fighting for freedom. They were fighting to keep the planet alive. Jayen's mind reeled as he pieced together the horrifying truth. All this time, he had thought the duels were a tradition, a way for the people of Ghal-Rain to prove their strength. But they weren't just a tradition. They were a ritual, a twisted sacrifice designed to keep the planet's consciousness alive and well. The duels didn't just fuel the planet's physical needs. They fed its very soul. The more destruction, the more violence, the more energy the planet gained. And the death duelists were its chosen vessels, bred for this purpose. But what was worse was that the weapons they fought with weren't just tools of destruction. They were part of the planet's network. The blades, the guns, the gauntlets, everything they used to fight, to kill, was designed to extract energy from the combatants. The weapons were more than just metal. They were conduits connected to the planet's vast, living web. Every strike, every wound, fed the planet. It was all part of the plan, part of the system that Jayen was now trapped in. As he walked to the tunnels beneath the arena, trying to gather his thoughts, Jayen realized that he couldn't escape. Not anymore. The duels had never been about survival. They had been a way to ensure that the planet's hunger was never sated. And now, Jayen had become part of that system. No matter how hard he fought, no matter how many enemies he killed, the planet would keep him alive just long enough to feed on his fear, his energy, and his soul. The voice in his head had grown louder, more insistent. It wasn't just a whisper anymore. It was a roar, a booming presence that rattled his mind. "You were chosen to be the final sacrifice," it said. "You are the last duelist, the last pawn." Jayen's heart skipped a beat as the word sunk in. The final sacrifice. He wasn't just another duelist. He was the last one, the final piece in the planet's game. The planet was not only using him, it had chosen him. He had been bred, just like all the others, to play this role. But unlike the others, Jayen wasn't ready to die. He wasn't ready to let the planet consume him like it had done to all the other fighters. He couldn't let it win. But the ground beneath his feet trembled. The air thickened. And for a moment, Jayen felt as if the very atmosphere was pressing in on him. It was the planet awakening. It was aware of him now, aware of his defiance. He wasn't just a pawn anymore. He was a threat, and it would stop at nothing to bring him down. He could hear the voice again, but this time it wasn't in his mind. It was in the very air around him, vibrating the walls of the tunnel. "You cannot escape," it said, the words echoing through his entire body. "You are the last of us, the last to fight, and now you will die for me." Jayen's fists clenched as he tried to hold himself together. The planet was alive, and it was using him, but it had underestimated him. He wasn't going to just give in. He wasn't going to be the final sacrifice. There had to be a way to fight back, a way to turn the tables. The voice seemed to laugh at him, a low, rumbling sound that filled the cavern around him. Jayen could feel it in his bones, like the planet itself was mocking him. But he wasn't going to let it win. He wasn't going to become just another offering to its hunger. With a burst of adrenaline, Jayen sprinted down the hallway, the tremors in the ground growing stronger with each step. The planet's presence seemed to follow him, an unseen force pushing him forward. There was only one thing left to do: survive. And maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to destroy the planet before it destroyed him. But the ground shook again, louder now, and the voice returned, even stronger than before. "You cannot win," it boomed. "This is your end." Jayen's heart raced as he sprinted, the voice echoing in his mind. This was it, the final fight. Jayen stood in the shadows of the underground tunnels, breathing heavily. The truth was no longer something he could ignore. The death duels weren't just a test of survival. They were a system, a ritual designed to feed the planet. And the planet itself was alive, a living consciousness that had been manipulating him all along. It wasn't just the arena that he had to escape. It was the entire planet. But as he looked around, he couldn't help but wonder, was escape even possible? The more Jayen thought about it, the more he realized that there was no real freedom. The planet was watching, feeding off the violence, the fear, the bloodshed. He was a pawn, but there had to be a way to turn the tables. He couldn't just sit here and wait to be destroyed. Not when he had learned the truth. Not when he understood what was at stake. After everything that had happened, Jayen had a plan. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even guaranteed to work. But it was the only chance he had. And it all started with the underground system. He had found it by accident. A hidden tunnel deep beneath the arena. The walls were cold and damp, the air thick with the scent of earth and decay. But it was more than just a way out. It was a path that led deeper into the heart of the planet itself. A place where he could confront what had been controlling everything. Jayen wasn't sure what he expected to find down there, but he certainly didn't expect to feel the ground shift beneath his feet as he walked. The deeper he went, the more alive the tunnels seemed to become. The walls hummed with energy, and the air vibrated with a strange force. It was as if the planet itself was aware of him, following his every move, trying to stop him from going further. At first, Jayen thought it was just his mind playing tricks on him. But then he felt it. The pulse, a low, rhythmic thrum that seemed to come from the very heart of the planet. He had heard rumors about the core, the source of the planet's power. Some said it was a living entity, a creature that controlled everything. Others believe it was a machine, something ancient and powerful that had been buried beneath the surface for centuries. Whatever it was the key to everything. And if Jayen could destroy it, he might be able to stop the planet from feeding on him and the others. But as he ventured deeper into the tunnels, Jayen began to realize that escaping wasn't going to be as simple as he thought. The planet was resisting him, fighting to keep him trapped in its grasp. The walls seemed to close in around him, the air growing heavier with each step. He could feel the consciousness of the planet pressing against his mind, trying to twist his thoughts, to make him doubt himself. It wasn't just the tunnels that were alive. The whole planet was watching him now, feeding off his fear, making him question whether he could really escape. Could he do it? Could he really destroy the heart of the planet? The answer, Jayen realized, was yes. He had no choice. There was no turning back now. If he didn't destroy the core, he would never be free, and neither would anyone else who was stuck in this endless cycle of death. But even as he made up his mind, Jayen couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The planet was alive, yes, but it wasn't just watching. It was manipulating everything around him, making sure he failed. Every step he took, every decision he made, seemed to bring him closer to something, but also further away. It was as if the deeper he went, the more the planet fought back, trying to pull him into its grasp. He pressed on, ignoring the creeping doubts that whispered in his mind. The tunnels were getting narrower now, the air thinner. Jayen could feel the weight of the planet bearing down on him. It was closing in, and yet he could also feel the pulse of the core, the beating heart of the planet, drawing him closer. He was almost there. Just as he thought he was close to reaching the center, the ground shook violently, throwing Jayen off balance. He barely caught himself on a nearby wall as the entire tunnel trembled. It wasn't an earthquake. It was the planet fighting back. The walls seemed to pulse with energy, a dark, swirling force that made Jayen's skin crawl. He could hear the voice in his mind again, louder this time, as if it was right beside him. "You think you can escape?" The voice whispered, full of malice. "You think you can destroy me?" Jayen clenched his fists, pushing forward despite the overwhelming force trying to stop him. "I'm not running anymore. I'm ending this." The deeper he went, the more the air seemed to grow thick, almost solid. The planet's consciousness was everywhere now, filling every crack and crevice, invading his thoughts, his body. It was like it was alive in every sense of the word, breathing, thinking, feeling. The very tunnels seemed to be alive, shifting, bending around him. The planet was no longer just a place. It was a presence. Jayen's heart raced as he reached the core. The chamber was vast, like a cathedral, with walls that seemed to stretch up into the darkness. In the center, glowing with a strange, otherworldly light, was the core. It was like nothing Jayen had ever seen before. It wasn't a machine, and it wasn't a living creature. It was both, a mass of energy, pulsing and writhing, the heart of the planet's power. Jayen's breath caught in his throat as he stepped closer. The closer he got, the more the planet seemed to fight him. The walls around him shuddered, and the voice in his mind roared with fury. "You are too late," it hissed. "You cannot stop me." But Jayen wasn't listening. He was focused on the core now, the pulsing light in front of him. He had to destroy it. This was the only way. He had to take the planet down with him. With a deep breath, Jayen drew the weapon from his side, a blade forged from the same material as the weapons used in the duels. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a conduit connected to the planet's energy, and that's exactly what he needed. He raised it high, feeling the energy crackling around him, the tension building to a breaking point. Just as he was about to strike, the ground beneath him cracked open, and a massive creature emerged from the depths. It was like nothing Jayen had ever seen, a twisted, nightmarish beast born from the chaos of the duels. Its body was made of the same living energy that powered the planet, its eyes glowing with a fierce, primal hunger. Jayen froze for a moment, his mind racing. This wasn't just a creature. It was the embodiment of the planet's will, and it wasn't going to let him destroy the core. The creature snarled, its massive jaws snapping open, and Jayen knew he had only one chance to survive. With a growl, he charged forward, ready to face whatever it threw at him. But as he did, the planet's voice echoed in his mind once more, its words chilling his very soul. "You cannot destroy me. You are mine." Jayen's grip tightened on the blade as he prepared for the final confrontation. The fight wasn't over yet, but he was ready. Jayen's heart pounded in his chest as he stood before the creature, its massive form looming over him like a nightmare made flesh. The air was thick with tension, the planet itself seeming to tremble with anticipation. The creature's glowing eyes burned into him, and Jayen could feel the energy it radiated. It wasn't just a creature. It was the embodiment of everything the planet had become. The anger, the fear, the violence, it all flowed through it. It was alive, and it wanted him dead. Jayen tightened his grip on the blade in his hand. The weapon hummed with power, its energy coursing through him like a river. He could feel the planet's power in his veins, every drop of energy from the duels feeding his strength. He wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was a weapon in himself, a force to be reckoned with. The planet had tried to break him, tried to control him, but it had failed. Now it was his turn. The creature roared, a deafening sound that shook the ground beneath their feet. It lunged at him, its massive jaws snapping open, its claws swiping to the air like knives. Jayen dodged to the side just in time, the creature's claws missing him by inches. He felt the heat of its breath on his skin, the stench of decay and death filling the air. The creature was relentless, its movements fast and unpredictable. It was like a force of nature, an unstoppable predator. But Jayen wasn't afraid. He had faced death countless times, and this was no different. The duels had taught him how to fight, how to survive. But more than that, they had taught him how to control the energy around him. The energy of the planet, the very force that had created the duels and kept them going for so long. It was now his to command. With a roar of his own, Jayen lunged at the creature, his blade raised high. The creature swung its massive arm at him, but Jayen was faster. He ducked under the attack and plunged his blade deep into the creature's side. The blade crackled with energy as it sank into the creature's flesh, and Jayen felt a surge of power course through him. The creature screeched in pain, but it didn't stop. It spun around, swinging its tail at him. Jayen barely managed to leap out of the way, his heart racing as the tail whizzed past him. The battle was brutal. Every strike from the creature was a reminder of how much it wanted him dead, how much the planet wanted him to fail. But Jayen wasn't just fighting for his life anymore. He was fighting for something bigger. He was fighting to end the reign of this planet, to stop it from consuming everything around it. The creature was powerful, but it wasn't invincible. And Jayen knew it. He could feel the energy in the air, crackling with power. The planet was fighting back, trying to keep him trapped in its grasp. But Jayen was no longer a pawn. He had become something more. The rage, the fear, the pain, all of it had fueled him. And now, he was ready to unleash everything he had left. With a battle cry, Jayen charged at the creature again, his blade glowing with intense energy. The creature roared, its jaws opening wide as it tried to bite him. But Jayen was too fast. He ducked beneath the creature's jaws and plunged his blade into its chest. The creature howled in pain, thrashing around, but Jayen held his ground. He pushed the blade deeper, his body trembling with the force of the planet's energy that flowed through him. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The creature's body went limp, and the energy around them seemed to fade. Jayen pulled the blade out, panting heavily. He had done it. He had killed the creature. He had destroyed the thing that had been controlling the planet, the thing that had been feeding off the fear and violence of the duels. For a moment, Jayen allowed himself to feel a brief sense of relief. He had won. He had done the impossible. But then, the ground began to shake. The walls of the chamber trembled, and the air grew heavy with an unsettling energy. Jayen's heart skipped a beat. Something wasn't right. The creature's body began to twist and writhe, its glowing eyes flickering back to life. Jayen stumbled back, his breath catching in his throat. It wasn't dead. It couldn't be. The creature's body shuddered as if it was being pulled back together, the energy from the planet pouring into it, making it whole again. Jayen watched in horror as the creature's body reformed, its muscles bulging and twisting. It was no longer the same creature. It had transformed, becoming something even more terrifying. The energy of the planet flowed through it like blood, and Jayen could feel its power. The creature wasn't just a being anymore. It was the planet itself. The heart of the planet was alive, and it was awakening. "No," Jayen whispered to himself. "This isn't over." The creature's eyes locked onto him, its gaze burning with an unnatural intensity. It didn't roar this time. Instead, it spoke, its voice a low growl that echoed in Jayen's mind. "You cannot destroy me," it said. "I am the planet. I am its will, and you are nothing." Jayen's blood ran cold as he realized the truth. The creature wasn't just a guardian of the planet. It was the planet's consciousness. It was everything that the planet had become. And it wasn't going to stop. No matter how hard he fought, no matter how many times he struck it down, the planet would always come back. It was endless. It was eternal. Jayen's grip on his blade tightened. He couldn't stop now. The battle was far from over. The planet had shown him its true nature, and now it was time to fight back. He didn't have the luxury of surrender. He had already made a promise to himself, to everyone who had suffered on this planet, that he wouldn't back down. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was a fight for freedom. A fight to end the endless cycle of death. With a final, desperate cry, Jayen charged the creature again, ready to face whatever new horrors the planet had in store for him. The fight had only just begun, and he would not give up, not until the planet was truly defeated. Not until it was finally, once and for all, free. Jayen stood amidst the ruins, his breath ragged, his body aching from a battle. The ground beneath him was fractured, crumbling as the last remnants of Ghal-Rain, the planet that held him captive for so long, faded into nothingness. The once thriving world was now a barren wasteland, its glowing energy slowly dimming, vanishing into the void. The planet's heart had stopped beating, the endless cycle of duels and death finally coming to an end. Jayen had won. The Death Duelist was no more. But as he stood there, amidst the destruction, he felt an unsettling shift within him. The planet was gone, yet something inside him felt alive. Something darker, more powerful than anything he had ever known. He looked down at his hands, his fingers trembling. The energy of the planet, the consciousness that had once controlled it, was now embedded within him. It was as if the essence of Ghal-Rain had been transferred into his very soul, and he could feel it pulsing there, a constant presence that was both comforting and terrifying. At first, he thought it was just the aftereffects of the battle, the adrenaline, the exhaustion, the shock. But the sensation didn't fade. It grew stronger. It was as if the planet's hunger, its insatiable thirst for power and destruction, had found a new home in him. He could feel it, gnawing at the edges of his mind, urging him to take action, to protect the remnants of what had been. Jayen's heart pounded as he realized the truth. He wasn't just a survivor. He wasn't just the last duelist. He had become something else entirely. The planet's will had fused with his own, and now he was its new guardian. The planet's consciousness, once a powerful force controlling the duels, was now a part of him. He could feel it in the air, in the earth beneath his feet. It was no longer just a place. It was him, and he was it. The hunger, the desired control, to dominate, was now a part of his very being. He looked around at the desolation. There was nothing left. No life, no purpose. The endless duels were over. The planet was dead, but its legacy, its insatiable thirst for blood and power, remained alive inside him. Jayen felt a chill run through him. He had won, but the victory felt hollow. He had destroyed the Death Duelist, the guardian of Ghal-Rain, but in doing so, he had inherited the very same power. The endless fight, the drive to protect, had become his own. As Jayen walked through the ruins, he could hear the whispers of the planet's consciousness in his mind. It was not a voice, but a feeling, a pull that tugged at him, urging him to act. He could feel the remnants of the planet's energy swirling around him, flowing through the air, through the broken ground. The hunger of Ghal-Rain was still there, still alive in him. But now, it was his responsibility to control it, to direct it, to protect the world that had once tried to destroy him. Jayen's footsteps echoed to the empty landscape, the weight of his new role settling over him like a cloak. He had been a pawn in the Death Duelist game, forced to fight for the entertainment of others. But now he was something more. He was a guardian of Ghal-Rain. The planet's what was inside him, and it was his duty to protect it from those who might try to exploit its power. There were always those who sought to control what they could not understand. Jayen had learned that the hard way. He stopped at the edge of a cliff, staring out the horizon where the once beautiful sky had now turned a dull shade of gray. The energy of the planet, the vibrant life force that had once powered everything, was fading, but it was still there, just beneath the surface, like a simmering volcano waiting to erupt. Jayen could feel it pulsing, calling to him, urging to take action. He clenched his fists, the power within him surging in response. His mind raced as he considered the future. Ghal-Rain was gone, but its legacy remained, and he would be the one to carry it forward. He would protect the planet's power, its energy, from those who would seek to exploit it. He would ensure that no one would ever again use the planet's consciousness for their own gain. He had become the last duelist, the final guardian of Ghal-Rain. The wind blew through the desolate landscape, carrying with it the faintest trace of the planet's once thriving energy. Jayen could feel it, could taste it in the air. The power of Ghal-Rain was still alive, but it was fading. Slowly, it was dying, its energy slipping away like water through his fingers. But Jayen wasn't about to let it go. He had already made the choice to become the planet's protector, its guardian, and he would fight to keep it alive, to preserve what was left. He turned away from the cliff, his eyes scanning the horizon. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. His fight was far from over. The planet's hunger, its thirst for control, was now his responsibility, and he would never stop fighting. Not for himself, not for the planet, but for those who had suffered because of it, for the duels, for the bloodshed, for the pain. He would make sure that Ghal-Rain's legacy would not be one of destruction, but protection. As he walked through the barren landscape, the whispers of the planet's consciousness grew louder in his mind. He could feel its presence, could hear its thoughts. It was no longer just a place. It was him. It was his duty, his purpose, to keep the planet's hunger at bay, to protect it, to ensure that no one else would ever try to exploit its power. Jayen stopped for a moment, looking up at the sky. The stars were dim, fading into the darkness. The planet was gone, but the hunger remained. It would always remain a part of him, a part of Ghal-Rain, and he would never stop fighting. The battles had changed, but the fight was the same. The fight for survival, for protection, for peace. "The planet is gone," he whispered to himself, "but its hunger is not. I am the last duelist, and I will never stop fighting." The wind picked up again, carrying the distant echoes of the planet's final breath. Jayen stood tall, his gaze unwavering as he looked into the darkness. The journey was far from over.